Good afternoon and welcome to the WEIM Governing Body General Session meeting. Please note that all audience microphones are muted until the public comment portion of the call. We'll give you instructions on how to enter the public comment queue at that time. With that, I'll turn the call over to Chair Rob Konziolka. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body, welcome to our March 2023 General Session meeting. Thank you for your attendance. Your interest in the matters before the governing body today are appreciated, and public comments are always welcome. To begin, I'm going to turn the call over to Corporate Secretary Roger Clanton for the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Konziolka. And let's go ahead with the roll call, and I'll start with you, Chair Konziolka.
I am here.
Vice Chair Gardner.
Here.
Member Campbell.
Here.
Member Prescott.
Here.
And Member Decker is not here today, so we'll just note that for the record, but we do have a quorum and we can proceed. Back to you, Chair Konziolka.
And with that, our next agenda item is the decision on the meeting minutes from January 31st. And I'll turn that back over to you, Roger, for approval.
Yes, before I do that though, let's back up one to.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're just testing me, and I appreciate that.
So before we do the meeting minutes, I would like to ask if there are any comments from the public. And this would be for comments that are not related to any of the agenda items. And with that, if you are interested in making a public comment, please do so. And I will ask Cyrus to give you instructions on how to do that.
If you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon located at the bottom center of your screen. When it is your turn, you will be sent a prompt to unmute yourself, and you will have to accept that prompt to become unmuted. If you are dialed into our phone-only line, you can dial #2 to raise your hand. There are no comments in the queue at this time.
So thank you. Now I'll go back to where I was before, and I will repeat. Our next agenda item is the approval of the meeting minutes from January 31st. I will turn that back over to Roger Clanton.
Thank you, Chair Konziolka. So if I can have a motion from the WEIM governing body to approve the January 31, 2023 general session minutes. Can I have a motion, please?
Roger, this is Jennifer. So moved.
Thank you, Jennifer. And second, please.
This is John. I'll second it.
Thank you. Chair Konziolka, your vote.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gardner, your vote.
Aye.
Member Campbell.
Aye.
And Member Prescott.
Aye.
Thank you, members. The motion passes.
Thank you. Before moving on, I have a few opening remarks, and I'll start with March Madness is upon us. I hate to relive the horror of this last weekend for me, but it was a tough one. My hometown Arizona Wildcats got knocked out in the very first game. And this was a number 2 seed to get up against the number 15 seed from Princeton, the Princeton Tigers. And the sad part is this was not the first time that the Arizona Wildcats have gone down as a number 2 seed. I think they might be the first school to lose twice as a number 2 school, as a number 2 seed. Only solace I really had going through this is a lot of top teams were knocked out. When I looked at it, only 9 of the seeds that were 1 through 4 made it to the Sweet 16. So that means 2 number 1 seeds got knocked out, 2 number 2 seeds were knocked out. 2 number 4 seeds were knocked out, and only 1 number 3 seed was knocked out. So, you're wondering where I'm going with this, and that is when the U of A lost before, it was 30 years ago, and they lost to a unheralded team from Santa Clara with a basketball legend now known as Steve Nash. And it was an interesting process. But the other part, when looking at that, is when they lost 30 years ago, it was only 4 years later that they won a national championship. So I'm not hoping that that was part of Arizona's strategic plan to get bumped like this to come back, but there's hope out there. There is hope. So, I say all this, and so what are those takeaways? One, it is really competitive out there, and you need to bring your A game every time and be prepared for something new that you haven't seen before, because there is always someone out there that is working hard to take you on. The other takeaway is don't bet on Arizona. So, continuing with the March Madness theme, I would like to provide an explanation on the agendas and the change in process from the last meeting. As you will recall, we uncovered some unfortunate issues in those cases where the governing body might want to provide specific or written advisory guidance to the Board of Governors. To immediately address this, you will note, and this is where you may need to tune into ESPN and take a look at what channel and what time this is on, is the market parameter changes enhancement. The decision on advisory role will take place today. Minimum state of charge extension, the decision on advisory role by the governing body will take place today. The market parameter changes enhancements, the guidance on advisory role to the Board of Governor will take place tomorrow at the joint meeting. On the market parameter changes enhancement, the portion that falls under joint authority decision will be tomorrow, Wednesday, at the joint meeting. And then lastly, on minimum state of charge extension, the guidance on advisory role to the Board of Governors from the governing body will take place in 2 days on Thursday at the Board of Governors General Session. A lot to cover, but maybe now as you look at the agendas over the 3 days, it makes a little more sense to you. Looking further out in time, and this would probably start happening likely in the last half of this year, we're in discussions with how to best proceed with the meeting processes to address the timing and development of governing body advisory opinions to the Board of Governors. When the governing body chooses to develop written input to the Board of Governors, the governing body needs to meet approximately 2 weeks prior to the Board of Governors meetings. This would allow 2 weeks to meet openly and develop an advisory opinion. This allows us approximately 1 week to condense the verbal discussion into a written advisory opinion and post approximately 1 week prior to the joint governing body Board of Governors meeting or the Board of Governor meeting. But we will still plan on having verbal discussions with the Board of Governors on advisory opinions at the joint meetings or at the Board of Governor meeting. So, kind of recapping what we'll do today is we will begin our meeting today with the CEO report. Then after the CEO report, we will receive updates on the latest activities and plans by the Bosher and the RIF. I will provide a short update on status of market expert implementation. And then next, we will address the governing body's decision on advisory role of 2 Board of Governor approval items: market parameter changes enhancement and minimum state of charge extension. Afterwards, we'll receive an update by staff on WEIM benefits and implementation of the next 3 WEIM participants. And lastly, staff will provide an updated outlook on the governing body 2023 planning calendar. This concludes my opening remarks. Our next agenda item 3, is a report from CAISO Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, Mark Rothwaiter. Mark, the floor is yours.
Chair Kanzioko, and thank you, governing body members. I appreciate your lessons learned from March Madness. I won't try to top that. But today, Elliot is unavailable this week, and so I will be providing the CEO update to you. As we transition to the spring and the bulk electric system continues to face the bulk system continues to face challenging and volatile weather conditions. We certainly value the precipitation and snowpack, improving the overall drought conditions in California ahead of this summer. However, the cold temperatures created challenges with natural gas in California and the West, but through strong coordination with different gas companies serving the state, we have been able to work through the operational challenges. Natural gas prices themselves have moderated quite a bit from the high price levels they were at in December, where we experienced average prices of $30.60 per MMBTU at the northern and southern hub. That has come down to an average of about $7.60 an MMBTU in February. Although still relatively high, the reduction in prices is welcome. We are ramping up our summer readiness activities with outreach and coordination, among other things. Our third annual Summer Readiness Leadership Roundtable is scheduled for May 9th. We are also working closely with utilities and others around the West to make sure we are prepared as possible for what could be another volatile and unpredictable summer season. We also have scheduled other operational tabletop drills for May 23rd. Additionally, our team produces the ISO Summer Loads and Resource Assessment, has been working on this year's report, which will be released in the spring. Recognizing the importance of being able to manage the state of charge on almost 5,000 megawatts of batteries during stress summer conditions, we are briefing you today in your advisory role for a request to extend through this summer the minimum state of charge feature we temporarily introduced 2 years ago and have surgically used during stress conditions the last 2 summers till we can implement approved enhancements now targeted for fall of this year. Coming off the February board and WEIM governing body decision to approve the final EDAM design proposal, along with the Governance Review Committee's governance proposal and the transmission service and marketing scheduling priorities, also known as the Wheeling Initiative, the ISO has shifted into implementation mode. We are currently drafting EDAM tariff language and fine-tuning implementation details. We will be publishing and seeking stakeholder input on tariff drafts shortly and targeting filing of our EDAM tariff with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission by the end of June. Separately, we continue to work internally on developing business requirements and starting to engage PacifiCorp, which has expressed their intent to join EDAM. We are also drafting tariff associated with the Wheel-Through Initiative that was approved in February. That draft tariff language should be out next week, the first draft, and we anticipate FERC filing at FERC in the third quarter of this year. Also, as discussed in February, we have continued the stakeholder process discussion on day-ahead market enhancements initiative. And we've recently hosted 3 workshops to discuss a narrow but important scope of issues related to the granularity and structure of procurement for the Imbalance Reserve product. We are now targeting to bring this topic to the WEIM governing body and the board for a decision at the May 23rd joint session. This week, we also continued our stakeholder engagement on the topic of price formation in the day-ahead and real-time markets, which includes scarcity pricing to incentivize resources available and performed during scarcity supply conditions, as well as fast start pricing that recognizes the value of flexible resources in the market, among other topics. This is another important initiative with implications for EDAM and our broader market design. We want to ensure there are appropriate price signals for resources to be valued and actively participate in the market. In support of the price formation initiative, we have contracted with a consultant experienced on these issues to help us evaluate different possibilities. On February 27th, we submitted the final report in response to the Assembly Concurrent Resolution 188. The report was prepared by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and transmitted along with a letter from Elliott. This is an exciting and dynamic time for energy in the West. We appreciate Assembly Member Chris Holden and the entire state legislature for requesting the report summarizing existing studies and papers on regional coordination of the electric power system and its potential impact on costs and reliability for California and the West. We believe members of the legislature will find the report helpful in describing the value proposition of broader regional coordination and for characterizing the initiatives that are underway across the region. We have also communicated and we stand ready to assist as work continues to find the most effective way forward for California and the West. Finally, the Western Energy Imbalance market is on track to bring on 3 new participants on April 5th. The Western Area Power Administration, Desert Southwest, El Paso Electric, and Avangrid Renewables. All 3 entities have their systems and procedures readiness certification completed, which were filed on March 3rd of this year. At this moment, El Paso and Avangrid are waiting for FERC authorization for market-based rate authority to support their WEIM participation. The authorization is expected any day, and we are excited to have these new partners join the WEIM. This concludes my rendition of the CEO report. Please let me know if you have any questions or follow-up.
Mark, thank you for those remarks. A lot has happened just since our last meeting, and we can tell that a lot is coming up right before us. So before I let you go, let me check to see if any of the governing body members have any questions. And Mark, I'm not seeing any, so thank you. I think your remarks pretty much covered what we wanted to hear, and so we appreciate those.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, we have an update on the body of state regulators. And with us today to provide that update is the Utah PSC chair and the Bosser chair, Tad LeVar. Tad?
Good afternoon, Chair Kanzioka, Vice Chair Gardner, and members of the WEIM governing body. As he said, my name is Thad LeVar. Today's report from the body of state regulators will be brief. But first, we welcomed a few new commissioners to the Bosser since our last report to the governing body. We've welcomed first Commissioner Milt Dumont of the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. And in connection with that, I also want to thank Commissioner Ann Rendall for her steadfast allegiance and contributions to the Bosser over many years. She was the first chair of the Bosser and has been with us since then. She's been instrumental for the Bosser, and I wish her the very best, but we welcome Commissioner Dumont. We've also welcomed Commissioner John Hammond of the Idaho Public Utilities Commission, and we also welcome Commissioner Gabriel Aguilera of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And we look forward to contributions from all of those in addition to our existing members. As chair of the Bosser and on behalf of our members, we look forward to these new members' engagement and participation in the California ISO and Western EIM and EDAM efforts over the next year. Next, the Bosser is currently reviewing the California ISO's draft policy catalog and 2023 through 2025 policy initiatives roadmap. The Bosser is assessing each of the initiatives and is determining its strategic priorities for the upcoming months and year. While this review is still in process, I anticipate the Bosser will place a meaningful focus over the next few months on the phase 1 price formation enhancements. Third, as the Bosser representative on the Western EIM nominating committee, Bosser Vice Chair Commissioner Haley Williamson from the Nevada Commission continues to work with the nominating committee and executive search firm for the 2 governing body openings. I understand that the nominating committee has made meaningful progress, and we all look forward to future updates from the committee as the selection process concludes. And then finally, our next meeting will be held on April 12th in conjunction with the CREPC YRAB meetings in Lake Tahoe. We look forward to seeing some of you there. The format will be different from previous in-person BOSSR meetings, taking place along with other multi-state committees as part of the organizational meeting for the Committee on Regional Power Cooperation. And this concludes my report today. On behalf of the body of state regulators, I want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chair LeVar, thank you so much for those remarks. Always appreciated. I'm going to check with the governing body members to see if there are any questions. And yes, Jennifer Gardner.
Yeah, thank you, Chair LeVar. I appreciate that update. I was curious if you could elaborate a little bit more on the structure for the next meeting of the BOSSR. It sounds like this is an opportunity for a lot of these, what I'm going to call generally regional state committees. You mentioned the COSSR, you mentioned the BOSSR meeting. Is this going to be a joint meeting, or are you talking about all of these, are these different groups coming together to have their own meetings separately, but all as a part of, I guess, a larger effort? If you could just elaborate on that. It seems like a unique opportunity.
Right. Well, I'm not sure if the agenda has been finalized, and I don't think it's been posted yet. I've seen preliminary drafts, and again, so I don't know what the status currently is, but there are two new multi-state committees that are forming that are associated with different entities. One with the Southwest Power Pool and one with the Western Power Pool. And the CREPC-WIRAB meeting is looking at how to schedule things to accommodate all three of those without adding days to the conference. And so they're still looking at the morning of, let's see, so it's April 12th, and that'll be in the morning, where the CREPC-WIRAB meetings start in the afternoon. I know part of that meeting is likely to be a report from the body of state regulators to CREPC. And then what other format the BOSSR might meet either that morning or throughout the remainder of the CREPC-WIRAB meeting, I think is still non-final. So I don't have a complete concrete answer for you today, Vice Chair.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much.
My apologies, I was on mute. Chair LeVar, I see there are no other questions, so thank you. We appreciate your update.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is agenda item 6, and it's agenda item 5, which is an update on the Regional Issues Forum. With us today to provide that update is the chair of the RIF, Josh Walter.
Thank you, Chair Konzioka and members of the governing body. As mentioned, I'm Josh Walter, currently serving as the chair of the Regional Issues Forum and representing the EIM sector on the RIF. I look forward to welcoming the 3 new members joining the EIM next month into the EIM sector, and also look forward to hearing updates on implementation later in this meeting. As a brief update on the Regional Issues Forum activities, the liaison members are meeting regularly and planning an in-person meeting on June 21st in Salt Lake City, the day prior to the governing body meeting. We are planning on holding the meeting at WEX offices and a reception after the meeting as customary. The content and agenda are still in the works. We hope to iron them out in our next RIF liaison meeting in the next 2 weeks or so. We're reviewing the various sectors' priorities and working on striking a balance between the multiple and variable opinions. Additionally, for this meeting and for future RIF meetings, we're working on striking a balance between continuing the historical educational aspect and function of the RIF with the new function of providing the governing body with an additional input source for informing the body on deliberative and decisional issues. Other than that, we don't have a lot of activity occurring within the RIF. Hope to have more information on the content, format, and agenda for the next meeting at a future governing body meeting. So with that concludes my update for today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Josh, thank you for that update. Always appreciated.
Of course.
I'll just say that I'm glad to see that the RIF was able to coordinate with the governing body on the June meeting and to allow those meetings to occur back to back and have them at the WEC offices. That makes it really convenient for everyone. I think that's a good outcome. Let me check to see if there are any questions from any of the governing body members. And I'm seeing the answer is no. So Josh, with that, again, thank you, appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Now we can move on to agenda item 6, which will be a short update by me on the implementation of the market expert. So at our last meeting, which was at the end of January, we had comments from Bonnie Blair of 6 Cities that were quite appropriate. And she had asked about timing and access to materials. And we had started down a path of defining those types of items so that it would be clear when material could be expected. So the governing body is developing material that we will share publicly, so there is a clear understanding of what stakeholders can expect with interaction with our market expert, the types of deliverables, and the timing of that information. The governing body wants to more clearly define how the market expert will be utilized, who the market expert can or should meet with, and what material or information the market expert should be able to access. Based on work to date, we are already asking the market expert to provide input to the governing body in the form of a memo. At times, there might be exceptions to this. So if you recall, we've had both PowerPoint slides and memo format used, and we're already finding that the memo tends to be more attractive and more useful for everyone. But again, time limitations could put a constraint that limit that use. We are also asking the market expert to provide the memo at least 1 week prior to the scheduled meeting where the topic will be addressed with the governing body. The memo will be submitted to CAISO, and CAISO will post the material. And it will be at that time the governing body will see the information at the same time that all the stakeholders do. So stay tuned for more information on this. We are planning on addressing this subject in more detail along with presentation material at our May or June meeting. So with that, we are going to move on to agenda item 7, which is a briefing on market parameter changes, enhancement, and decision on our advisory role. So to kick us off will be Anna McKenna, Vice President, Market Policy and Performance. Anna?
Thank you, Chair Kanzioka and governing body members. Hello, everybody. I have the pleasure of presenting to you today the briefing on the market parameter changes that we're looking to make as well. And one of these items, as noted earlier, is coming to you as advisory. And tomorrow there'll be also a item on joint, as Chair Kanzioka pointed out earlier. This is a change that we're proposing to make to enhance efficiency in our market. It is limited change, but one that we do think is necessary. The parameter change impacts the ISO market only at this time, and Guillermo will walk you through those details. And so with that, I will turn this over to Guillermo Bautista Alderete, who will be walking you through the proposals.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Perfect. Good afternoon, members of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body. I'm here to present a briefing on one part of the proposal that we call market parameter change enhancements. This is a very targeted effort that was initiated to address a specific issue that we identified through the assessment of the ISO market performance. Can we move to the next slide, please? The proposed change covered in this briefing is to reduce a threshold for calculated values in the market known as shift factors. The reduced threshold will apply only to specific aggregated locations in the CAISO balancing area. Let me start with some background first. A key feature of the ISO market is the use of locational marginal prices. The market determines the optimal schedules and prices in a way that considers all the transmission limitations. That is what we call congestion management. And it simply means that resource dispatches have to be feasible to flow throughout the transmission system. The markets calculate a set of parameters known as shift factors. These factors measure the contribution of a resource at certain location to the power flows of a given transmission constraint. For example, if a resource has a dispatch of, let's say, 200 megawatts, and its shift factor is at 10%, it means 20 megawatts of that generation will flow on the transmission line. The factor measures the effectiveness of the resource to manage congestion in the transmission system, and its value depends on both the location of the resource and also on the transmission system conditions. These factors are also used to calculate the resource prices. More specifically, they will determine the value of the marginal congestion component that is part of the LMPs. Currently, the market applies a threshold of 2% to all shift factors from all locations, including locations with either individual or aggregated resources. This was implemented since the ISO started its nodal market back in 2009. Resources with a factor of less than 2% are not considered because these resources may not be effective to manage congestion and indeed could lead to unreasonable redispatch of resources for very little gain in congestion management. This wouldn't be a prudent or consistent with good utility practice. There is also the computational concern that by using no threshold at all, there will be considerable data set to handle in the market system. Next slide, please. As part of its regular market performance assessment, the ISO an inefficiency in the way the application of the shift factor threshold is applied on aggregated locations. This can be illustrated with the following example. First, consider we have an aggregated location, like a typical default load aggregation point, with a schedule of, let's say, 20,000 megawatts, and assume the shift factor is only 1.8%, which is below the threshold of 2%. The contribution of this aggregated location alone would be 1.8% of 20,000 megawatts. That amounts to 360 megawatts. For any given transmission constraint, that is quite a significant flow contribution that is not considered because of the threshold. In some cases, like in this illustration, if the transmission limit is small, like 250 megawatts, this contribution alone can be fully utilize the transmission capacity or even change the direction of the flow on the constraint. Now consider for the second part, the case of individual resource, like a typical generating unit, let's say with 500 megawatts of capacity. You use the same shift factor of 1.8%, its contribution would mean only 9 megawatts. These 9 megawatts relative to 360 megawatts of the aggregated location is much less material for the flow contribution, even if they both have the same shift factor threshold. The key point here is that size matters and matters a lot for the congestion management. Next slide, please. During the performance of the analysis that we carried for the new policy that we implemented in 2019 regarding the settlements of a financial product that we have in the system called congestion revenue rights, the ISO observed an inefficiency in how we settle those congestion revenue rights precisely by the consideration of the 2% threshold on aggregated locations. As illustrated in the previous example, with the current application of the 2% threshold to all locations, the flow contributions from these large aggregated locations are just too large to disregard in the congestion management and price formation. And even more, because the new policy implemented for settling congestion revenue rights relies now on the shift factors, the same issue of lacking to account for that flow contribution transpires now into the congestion revenue rights settlements. and this has resulted in either under collection of funds to pay the CRRs or to overcharge the shortfalls applicable to the congestion revenue rights. This issue has become even more critical when we are settling congestion revenue rights on transmission elements that have a very relatively small capacity. Next slide, please. In order to address this issue, the ISO is proposing to reduce the current threshold for very specific aggregated locations. Specifically, the ISO proposes to reduce the threshold from the current 2% value to 0.2% for only default load aggregation points and trading hubs. We are pursuing this change through a formal process because this specific value of the 2% threshold is currently defined in the tariff. The existing 2% threshold could continue to apply to all other locations. The reason for not changing this threshold for all locations is because the original concerns we have about inefficient redispatch of resources and the computational burden are still relevant to the current condition of the market. The proposed change targets the flow contributions of only aggregated locations. There is no change in the congestion management. There is no change in the price formation. This will continue to be applicable in the same way we currently do it for all locations, even for those that have the current threshold of 2%. This will ensure that dispatches and prices remain consistent. Now, because the driver for this proposed change is from the impact of congestion revenue right settlements, which is currently only an issue for the ISO balancing area, management is proposing to apply this change to the ISO default load aggregating points and also to the trading hubs within the ISO. This will not apply to the Western Energy Imbalance Market load aggregation points and the default generation aggregation points. Lastly, because there are some intertie locations with large schedules, the same implications can result when dealing with intertie locations and the settlements for congestion revenue rights. The ISO will consider to apply the lower threshold also to intertie locations based on a future assessment of their impact on the settlements of congestion revenue rights. Once that assessment is complete, the ISO would have the authority to use the lower threshold to a specific interties. Next slide, please. Moving on to stakeholder positions. Overall, stakeholders support the proposal. During the stakeholder process, the ISO addressed comments and adjusted certain aspects of the proposal accordingly. One request was to expand the application of the reduced factor threshold to all interties and even to all locations. We do see merits to consider the application of this reduced threshold to some interties, the ones that are quite large. And we are seeking authority to be able to do this after we have completed the assessment for a specific interties. However, the ISO is not considering to expand this to all locations, given that still the relevant concerns we have about ineffective redispatches of resources is present. In a second set of comments, one stakeholder expressed concerns with both reducing the threshold for only aggregated locations and how the differentiated treatment applies to these locations. The ISO has explained that the change of the threshold will be more accurate, not only for the formation of the flow, but also for the price formation. And indeed, the prices could either increase or decrease because it's relative to the congestion of the system. Also, the ISO has expanded the analysis in the proposal to provide more insights and assess the price impacts. Now, regarding the second component about the differentiated treatment for aggregated locations, the proposal is based on the fundamental difference on the magnitude of the aggregated locations relative to the individual locations, and how that relative difference in size also leads to quite significant difference of flow contributions. Any participant bidding at any aggregated location will be considered in the same way in the market clearing process. There is no discrimination in that regard. Lastly, there was one WEIM participant that supported the proposal, but wanted to further understand the logic for our decisional classification of the advisory role for the Western Energy Imbalance Market governing body, regarding specifically this component of the proposal of the threshold. Currently, this change arises from an enhancement for the day-ahead market, which is currently applicable only to the CAISO area. Given the timing of this initiative, there is a possibility that this or any other initiative between now and the active time of the extended day-ahead market may have implications for future extended day-ahead market participants. Although the change to the shift factor threshold would apply only to the CAISO and not to the WEIM or the EDAM for now, it could potentially establish a logical methodology that could be expanded once we have the extended day-ahead market. To ensure there is proper stakeholder review for this specific policy, as it may affect the extended day-ahead market participants, and also to move ahead with this specific change nowadays that applies to the CAISO, we are committing to have a subsequent stakeholder review for this policy in connection with the tariff language that eventually may come for the extended day-ahead market. Next slide, please. With this background and the proposal described, the ISO management is recommending the Western Energy Imbalance Market governing body to advise the ISO Board of Governors its support for the proposal to apply a 0.2% shift factor threshold to ISO-only aggregated locations. This proposal will improve market efficiency because it will produce more accurate estimates of flow contributions for these aggregated locations and will create a more accurate price formation. This will also result in more accurate settlements of congestion revenue rights. That's all what I have for this briefing. I will be glad to address any questions or follow-ups you may have.
Guillermo, thank you for this overview of this approval item. Let me roll to the governing body members to see if they have any questions for you. And I am confirming right now, I do not see any. I do have one, Guillermo, and that is in the comments, there were some that had queried about the accuracy of the forecast on this fix. And my question for you is, will the market participants be able to track the information once these changes are made so they can confirm that these changes as implemented provide the results that are expected?
Yes, let me answer that. There are different pieces of information that we publicly post, including, for instance, the prices for congestion in the system. That is something that is available and visible to participants. In order for them to be able to realize the implications of this change, they will also need to have another piece of information that is effectively the shift factors. That is a data set that is currently available for participants through one of our portals. They have to have access to that system. And with that information and information that we make publicly available about the constraints that are congested in the system, they should be able to match precisely the congestion marginal price that we produce in the market. Furthermore, for participants actively engaged in the market for congestion revenue rights, there is also information that allows them to see specifically the contributions of the flows by constraint.
Excellent. I appreciate that. It's good to know that that is have the ability to confirm what they were expecting to see, and if they have any questions, they can follow up with staff. So thank you. Before I go to public comment, I do want to make one remark, Guillermo and Anna, to thank you for the commitment to address the issue brought up on the potential changes that will ultimately be required when EDAM is approved and developed. And I think that all of the stakeholders appreciate knowing that once that is in place, there'll be an opportunity to look at that tariff language on how it impacts anything that's occurred from, let's say, now until then. So with that, Cyrus, let's go to public comment.
As a reminder to attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your screen, or if you are dialed into our phone-only line, you can press #2 to enter the comment queue. There seem to be no comments in the queue at this time.
Thank you. We will move on. So at this point in time, we will go to addressing the proposed motion on our advisory role. And before we move forward, I want to ask the governing body members if they have any discussion they want to have on this proposed action. Okay, with that, Roger, I think we can go to the motion as developed. And I will start with suggestions with the will and verbal and supporting.
Okay, we'll go ahead and we will take the motion. Move that the WEIM governing body will provide verbal advisory input to the ISO Board of Governors as discussed at its March 21, 2023 general session meeting, supporting management's position on the shift factor threshold element of the market parameter changes enhancement proposal. Can I have a motion, please?
So move.
And second?
Second, this is John.
Thank you. We'll take the vote, and noting that Member Decker is not present. Member Campbell, your vote?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gardner?
Yes.
Chair Konzioka?
Yes.
And Member Prescott?
Yes.
Thank you, members. The vote is 4-0 and the motion passes.
Thank you. We can now move on to our next agenda item, which is agenda item 8, and that is a briefing on the minimum state of charge extension and decision on advisory role. With us, I guess, Anna, you're still there. So Anna, please take it away.
Yes, thank you, Chair Konzioka. And as you noted, we will be shortly briefing you on our request for an extension of the minimum state of charge constraint that's currently in place. Our request is for a limited extension until we have the opportunity to implement later this year certain enhancements that will obviate the need for the constraint. Also, I wanted to note that the constraint itself has been used in very limited circumstances, such as on September 6th last year during very constrained conditions on the system. So it does have very limited use, however, very critical on those days. And because of that, we are asking for the ability to extend it past this summer because the constraint does expire later this year, and we would like to have the opportunity to have this in place for the summer conditions. With that, I will turn it over to Gabe Murtaugh, our storage sector manager, who will be walking you through the proposal. Gabe? I'll check to see if Gabe, we can't hear you, so perhaps you might be on mute. Well, I apologize.
Hold on 1 second, Anna. This is Christina. Gabe's going to be joining in a second. Hold on. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, he must have gotten dropped.
Yeah. There's been a lot of technical issues today, so just give it a moment.
Okay. Well, we can talk about March Madness, but I'm not quite sure what's going on. So.
I will say that after the early loss, I got a lot of time back.
Yes, there's always projects you can turn to, I'm sure.
Well, just remember with the March Madness, no matter how good you think you are, don't think you're that good, because it keeps you motivated.
No, it is absolutely true. You take a look at a team like Purdue, you know, getting knocked out by a number 16 seed, and it just goes to prove that all these teams that are in that tournament are winners, and they know how to
Right.
play hard and they know how to win. And yeah, you can't take anyone lightly. And
Yeah.
clearly they saw something they hadn't seen before.
Yeah, don't believe your own press.
It looks like, are we making some headway, Christina, or?
All right, Silas, do you see Gabe on yet? I know I texted him, Anna, and he said he's joining, or he's going to be joining in a second. So we're getting there.
And Anna, you could also, if you wanted to start with that first slide, and Gabe can.
Yes, we can do that and just have him step in. So just as background, the minimum state of charge constraint, we initially asked for approval of this constraint from the Board of Governors prior to September 2021. And it was developed with the intent of ensuring that during those most constrained conditions, rather than through manual action that the operators have to take on the system, that we have a constraint in the market that allows us to ensure that the state of charge that is necessary to ensure that the storage resources are available when needed later in the day, that we have an actual constraint in the market. It was a tool that we want to be able to use, and in particular for our resource adequacy resources, you know, to ensure that those resources that are committed to serve ISO load are in fact there. And with the state of charge as it's currently configured, we do have multiple ways of modeling the state of charge on the system. However, the market itself did not have an ability to ensure that there was the sufficient charge. Now, there are other ways of doing this, of course, through bids, and also ensuring that the market has all the information provided by the market participants through their bids as to when their availability and what actions they may need to take to ensure they're fully charged. That said, given some observations and analysis we had done prior to summer of 2021, we felt it was important to adopt a constraint where the market itself would actually look specifically for that criteria. We intended this to be an interim solution, and we did so in anticipation that we were going to develop more market-based solutions, including the ability to compensate for when these constraints are enforced. And at the time, and as currently exists, the constraint is not a constraint that is paid for. In other words, it doesn't reflect in the price, the use of the constraint. And so there's been some concerns around that. But it was intended to be an interim solution, and we did, in fact, develop some measures that you all approved last December in our energy storage enhancements that would allow the ability through the market and compensation for the resources when they're being held back, if you wish, for ensuring the state of charge, that we will allow us to do it through the market process. For a series of issues, we were not able to implement those changes prior to the summer. And because this interim constraint is intended to expire prior to the summer, we would have a gap, if you wish, before the summer. The other thing I wanted to note is that, okay, looks like Gabe is on, so I may just stop for a moment. Gabe, I just got going on the background. So if you are on, I'll be happy to switch this over to you. Really pretty much have just gotten through the first two major bullets. So Gabe, if you'd like, you could perhaps walk us through the presentation more deeply.
Excellent. Thanks, Anna, and I do apologize for being late. Well, early compared to the agenda time, late compared to when we were actually starting this. Can you guys hear me, first of all? Let's just confirm that.
Yes,
we can hear you.
Excellent. That's great. Okay. So yeah, thinking about this particular issue, you really do have to go back to in between summer 2020 and summer 2021. This was, during summer 2020, we had some reliability issues, and going into summer 2021, we were really trying to do everything we possibly could to ensure that we were going to be able to run the system reliably and not have any issues for summer 2021 and beyond. And we actually came in, just prior to summer 2021 with a whole package of changes. And these were all improvements for, reliable grid operations, particularly during stress conditions. But one of the things that we were thinking about is this tool called the minimum stated charge requirement. And the minimum stated charge requirement was, and I think Anna was setting this up in sort of the preamble, it was this tool to ensure that storage resources specifically had sufficient stated charge, be able to meet their day ahead discharge schedules. And the reason why that's important is because in the day ahead market, you're really optimizing over a 24-hour horizon. So you're thinking about a period from midnight to midnight, and that market, particularly when you're optimizing 4-hour duration batteries, understands that those storage resources are best used when they're charged during the lowest price hours or the hours where you have the lowest net load, and then they're best used for discharging during the hours of the highest net load. So you're effectively discharging them when prices are lowest, and then, or prices are highest, and then charging them when prices are lowest. And you're gaining some efficiency in terms of your market optimization when you do that. What our real-time market doesn't understand is when you're solving the real-time problem, you're really only looking at a 1-hour window. So for example, if it's 10 o'clock in the morning and you're looking to schedule a storage resource, you're determining how to schedule that resource in between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m., and you're not looking beyond that. And you don't know that if you don't charge that resource now or sometime in the next few hours, that you could potentially have a reliability issue because that resource doesn't have any stated charge later in the day, say in hour ending 8 p.m. or hour ending 7 p.m. or something like that. So this was one of those aspects of the changes that we were looking to make going into summer 2021. And I think one of the real drivers for that was that we were anticipating at the time, summer 2020, we had a handful of storage resources on the grid for just a couple hundred megawatts at most. We were anticipating some very high volumes of new storage coming onto the grid in summer 2021 and summer 2022, and indeed those did come to fruition. And I think in summer 2021 we had north of 1,000 megawatts in the system, and summer 2021, last summer, we had closer to 4,000 megawatts in the system. So these numbers are really growing very rapidly, and frankly they're continuing to grow over the next few years, or we're anticipating them growing over the next few years as well. So there's going to continue to be a lot more storage in the system. So what this tool does is, again, it ensures that the storage resources have sufficient stated charge to meet those day-ahead discharge awards. And we recognized very early on that this wasn't something, that was, a market product. It wasn't something that was priced in our markets. And we got feedback, and we were talking about this internally as well, that a much better way to do this would be some kind of mechanism that was priced, and you actually come up with a market commodity like we do with so many other things, and actually price this into our market. So we knew that because of this, we didn't want to be employing this excessively, and we took action and made sure that this tool was very surgical, and we were only using it in those times of absolute extreme need. So specifically, the rules we put in place around these requirements were that they, first of all, they would only apply to resource adequacy storage resources. So if your resource wasn't shown for resource adequacy for some reason, you wouldn't have any additional constraints put on it. We also ensured that storage resources would, you'd only be applying this on the absolute tightest days. So these are days when we have issues with supply being insufficient to meet demand in the day-ahead market. or we call that, those RUC and feasibility days, and those don't happen very often. And then we're also not applying this on any discharge schedule. These are only specific discharge schedules during critical hours when our operators have deemed there's real risk of dropping load during that time. Typically, these conditions were enforced when they were enforced over the last 2 summers during hours ending 17 through 22, roughly those ballparks on the days that they were enforced. We didn't actually use the constraint that much, but we did use it on critical days, and it was helpful in ensuring that these storage resources had state of charge. Last year in summer 2021, where we had very extreme high heat conditions and some really challenging system conditions, I think we used this 14 days. In the prior year, it was significantly fewer, much closer to 5 days. So, overall, more typical years, we would hardly be using this at all. And then even in those extreme years, we're still only using this, a handful of times. Application was limited, and we did do a thorough deep dive on how we use this in summer 2022, and we recognized that this was an important tool for our operations team, and that it would be helpful in lieu of nothing else in the interim. But what we did commit to stakeholders when we initially put this together is that we would be working on new tools to replace the existing minimum state of charge requirements, and we did do that. So over the last 2 years, we have been working on policy, and specifically, I was here talking to this group in December, and at that December meeting, we looked at the changes that were involved around the Energy Storage Enhancements Initiative, and those changes did include new tools for our operations team to use to help exceptionally dispatch storage resources, and it includes a specific new tool where they can specify a megawatt hour target. So if they want a storage resource to be at 200 megawatt hours, they can actually specify that, where today they can only use the specific existing exceptional dispatch tools, which specify a target megawatt value. So if they want to have the resource charge or discharge or set at 0, they can do that today. But it's not as sophisticated as these tools that are coming down the line. We've also developed new compensation avenues for these resources. And when they're expressly told to hold state of charge, there's an additional uplift payment that can be made to those resources that can compensate them for the lost opportunity, because we recognize that prices could definitely be higher during those intervals. We're asking them to hold state of charge, where they might prefer to actually discharge it and earn those market revenues in the real-time market, and then they only get to discharge later in the day. So Anna, could you advance the next slide, or Christina, if you're driving the slides? Thank you. So what we're asking here today is an extension to the existing tools. So we'd like to extend the use of the minimum state of charge requirement through the end of summer 2023. We've asked for a specific date of September 30th, 2023. And in the meantime, we did get some stakeholder feedback asking us to deliver these tools as quickly as possible, and replace the existing tool with the new tools that we've worked out the policy for. We've actually gone back and we've talked with our software development team, and obviously, it takes time to develop the business specifications for what we're actually going to be developing in our software. And thinking about the time to actually develop those requirements and get those requirements developed and ensure, we do the user acceptance testing to make sure that everything we're developing in the software sphere is accurate and is going to meet the needs of our operators. We are told by the development team that that will not be possible prior to the fall 2023 release. But we're also told that we have a high degree of confidence in getting those changes implemented in fall 2023 in that release, which would obviate the need for extending the minimum state of charge constraint further beyond summer 2022. So that's what we're asking here today. So if we go to the next slide, this is just a very quick, very high-level summary of stakeholder feedback. I think that there was some support for this proposal, particularly among utilities and we had some support amongst like organizations like the CPUC, and there was some support from Department of Market Monitoring. But again, I think even though we did have the support, this was tempered. You know, they did say we want to implement these changes very quickly. I think that the feedback that we got from the storage community was that we really want to implement these changes as quickly as possible, and they would prefer that there wasn't this extension year. And again, we've talked to our software development team, and we just don't think that's possible at this time. So Anna, I think that's everything that I've got prepared. Are there any questions?
No, I guess, are there any questions by the governing body? Thank you, Gabe.
So John, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks, Gabe and Anna, for that presentation. I appreciate it. So yeah, I'm certainly in favor of taking time to get it right and not implement it and find out there's problems. So as much as I'd like to see it resolved sooner, I understand the need for the extension. But can you maybe put your finger on the reason it wasn't implemented in time for this season as well? I mean, is it just the change was bigger than anticipated? Is it staffing? What drove this? And again, I'm not being critical. I'm just trying to understand that, and certainly supportive of the extension if it gets us to the right solution.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I think it's a good one. You know, when we came to this body with the work that we had done on energy storage enhancements, you know, it wasn't just a simple, straightforward piece of policy that only included a replacement tool for the minimum stated charge requirement. This was a holistic package of changes to our market for operating storage resources, you know, in almost all aspects that they're regarded in our market systems. So I think because the breadth of that stakeholder effort was so wide, we weren't able to complete that in a particularly short period of time. And I think that that's kind of what pushed our timeline out to some extent. I think had we just gone in with a targeted piece of policy, just looking at a replacement tool for this, we could have done that more quickly and probably met the 2-year mark.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Let me see if there's any other questions from governing body members. And I'm not seeing any. Gabe, I do have one question, and that is dealing with the September 30th date. I understand that you know, in the draft, you were incorporating more time, and then due to participant feedback, you've moved it forward here to, you know, kind of drive a deadline to make sure it gets implemented and not dragged on. Is September 30th enough time? I mean, you know, since this is interim and it's just extended, you know, I just want to make certain that as we discuss this, it shouldn't be the end of October, the end of November, to make certain that there's time to kind of do what John was saying, is making certain that the implementation can be rolled out and completed by September 30th deadline.
Yeah, I think this does allow enough time. So, you know, as I said, this is a very surgical tool that we have right now, and we only use it on days when we have these situations where we have insufficient supply to meet demand. And we've done, you know, pretty deep analysis on this, and the analysis shows that these can really, you know, these scenarios where we're triggering this tool can really only happen during, you know, the summer months. So those range from, you know, early to mid-June through about mid-September, and there's really no possibility, or it's very, very, very unlikely that we trigger this tool outside of those timeframes. So given that we'll have this tool, the existing tool, in place through September 30th, 2023, as long as we can get the development in place before summer 2024, so June 1, 2024, we should be okay in terms of coverage from this type of event.
Okay, thank you. I just, before we move on, I just want to make certain that you know, you didn't feel that date being pulled up provided a constraint that caused issues or concerns that couldn't be addressed by a later date. So very good. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
go
we're
ahead.
comfortable with this.
All right. With that, I think your next slide even showed it. We can now go to public comment. So Cyrus, can you check and see if there is any public comment on this item?
Absolutely. If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom center of your Zoom screen or dial #2 on the phone only line. There seems to be no comments in the queue at this time.
Iris, thank you very much. I think we can now move on to the decision portion of this. Before we move forward, let me check with the governing body members to see if there are any comments or items that they want to address before moving forward. I have to scroll here to make certain. Okay, we do not see any. So Roger, on this one here, I will suggest that we go with the will, with the verbal, and supporting.
Thank you, Chair Kanzioker. Let me read the motion. Move that the WEIM governing body will provide verbal advisory input to the ISO Board of Governors as discussed at its March 21, 2023 general session meeting supporting management's minimum state of charge extension proposal. Have a motion, please.
So moved. This is John.
Thank you, John. Second.
Second, this is Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer. Member Campbell, your vote, please.
Aye.
Vice Chair Gardner, your vote, please.
Aye.
Chair Kanzioka.
Aye.
Member Prescott.
Aye.
Thank you, members. The motion passes.
Excellent, and thank you, Roger, and excellent, and I'd like to thank on both those items, Anna and her team, and specifically Guillermo and we'll make sure and Gabe on covering this and in addressing our questions and moving us through it. So now we can move on to agenda item 9, which is one of the more interesting, fun portions of this is the benefits and market update. And you know, when there's good news, it's always great news. So with that, Anna, I'll turn that back over to you.
Well, I won't keep us too long, and thank you for your kind comments earlier. I appreciate it from my whole team. Thank you. I and the stakeholders actually, who also participated quite a bit in making sure we got these changes right. On this item, I will quickly turn it over to Guillermo. And yes, Guillermo has good news in this area, so I won't steal his thunder. So Guillermo, please walk us through the benefits report.
Thank you, Anna. Good afternoon again, members of the WEIM governing body. This briefing is to cover specifically the Q4 of 2022 benefits. Can we move to the next slide, please? In the Q4, we saw significant benefits that total $485 million. This is the second largest benefit observed since the inception of the WEIM market. And there are several factors contributing to this level of benefits. First, we have a steady increase in the number of entities participating in the imbalance market. Participation of more EIM entities will enable more economic transactions, not only for the new entities, but also for the existing entities. Secondly, we continue to see robust levels of transfers among all the entities participating in the market, which to some extent reflects the economics of the wider EIM market. Third, the economic transfers also result in economic displacement of higher value energy. When an energy transfer is realized, a cheaper energy transfer effectively displaces more expensive generation in the receiving area. This will lead to benefits in the way of cost savings. And lastly, something that was very dramatic for this Q4, specifically in December, is that we did see high electric prices, and that was largely due to the gas prices that we saw not only in the CAISO area, but in the West overall. Next, please. With this quarter four, $485 million, the cumulative benefits so far amounts to $3.4 billion. This level of gross economical benefits is a very good testament of how valuable and effective the Western energy imbalance market is to be able to meet supply and demand at the least cost across this wider footprint that covers the imbalance market. Next slide, please. Another area that we track as part of the benefits is regarding the avoided energy curtailments. If not for energy transfers facilitated by the imbalance market, some renewable generation would be curtailed. The portion in dark, the bars in dark blue, reflects the curtailments in the CAISO system, while the light blue represents the avoided curtailments due to the imbalance market. The dotted gray line reflects the total cumulative avoided curtailment. As we can see, avoided curtailments continue to accrue over time, and there is typically a quite marked seasonal trend, with low levels of curtailments observed in quarter four. That is the time of the year when that naturally happens. Next slide, please. The most interesting part is for sure the profile of the transfers. This is a quite busy plot, and let me try to navigate through the meaning of this information. A significant part of the benefits is from the transfers across all balancing areas. Transfers enable access to lower cost supply from one area to another. It can also be possible that a transfer is actually realized between two areas that are not directly connected, and the EIM market allows that through transactions to realize. This is how locational markets can leverage and maximize the opportunities across this wider footprint. We have been tracking the volume of transfers and will through realizing the WEIM market. And this figure illustrates the total flow of transfers among every pairwise of balancing areas, specifically in the quarter four of 2022. The size of the stream flow reflects the relative volume of the transfers. The left-hand side is for the balancing areas where the transfer is coming from, and the right-hand side is for the balancing areas where the transfers are going to sink. Areas on the left are exporting, while areas on the right are importing. This is a very intuitive way to illustrate the interaction of the balancing areas through the transfers. This also allows us to see how the total transfers of one area is distributed to other areas. You can see, for instance, with the color in pink and orange, for CAISO flow, for the total CAISO transfers, how that goes into many different areas of the market. There are many streams in this figure, and this is actually a very illustration that shows that there is many permutations of pairwise transfers happening among many areas. And this is again a good testament of how effectively the Western energy imbalance market is able to maximize the economical opportunities to meet the demand and supply across this imbalance market footprint. Next slide, please. Although the transfers are quite dynamic, they can change on 5-minute basis, on 15-minute basis. They tend to have certain patterns depending on the seasonality of the period. This plot illustrates per month the hourly profile of the transfers across the different areas. A positive value represents a transfer import coming into a given area. You can see some patterns here. Specifically, the CAISO area tends to export a significant volume of energy during the midday hours. That is the profile that you can see more markedly in the October and November months. And then switch to become an import position for the peak hours of the day. Other areas such as Bank and Idaho will be the counterparties taking on these transfers. And in Q4, this trend was quite defined for the first 2 months. It becomes a little bit less defined for the month of December. Next slide, please. Lastly, but not least, we have the trend of prices. Overall prices increased through the quarter, going from an average of about $60 per megawatt hour up to $250 per megawatt hour on average. That was in the month of December. The very steep increase of prices observed in December was largely driven by higher gas prices. For a reference, we also include the external bilateral prices for 3 hubs, Mid-C, Palo Verde, and Hub. And these are shown with specific markers in the middle of each group. Just as a reference, on average, you can see that for the most significant prices of Mid-C and Palo Verde, these bilateral prices track closely to the imbalance market prices observed in the real-time market. December was a challenging month. You may have seen all the information. We actually posted a report regarding the impacts of the gas prices. That was a wet and condition that we observed in December. That continued to happen partially through the month of January. And it was until February when prices subsided to more typical ranges that we have seen for gas prices. And because gas generation is still a significant contributor to the generation mix, they are going to influence highly the electric prices. That's all the material that I have this briefing. I will be happy to address any questions you may have.
Guillermo, thank you for this update. Always fascinating, always great material. And just, we have a question from John.
Okay, thank you, Rob, and thank you, Guillermo. If we could go back a couple of slides, I think it's the robust volume. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Christina. So, when I first looked at this slide, it's like, oh my gosh, what do I see in this? But when you drill down, there's a tremendous amount of information. The question I've got is when I'm looking at the, I guess it would be the importer on the right-hand side, I see an entity like bank. I think they're the second one down on the right-hand column and pretty significant, but I don't see them at all on the left hand. So I'm assuming that's telling me that during this period of time, they did very, very little exporting. Is that correct?
Yes, conceptually, that's the correct interpretation. Let me just provide a caveat because it's not explicit in this plot. We have to truncate all the combinations that we have for the transfers between pairwise balancing areas because there are very tiny ones that still happen and they are all together with these meaningful ones. Is going to be basically too crowded to show. So there may be some transfers that still are not shown here just because of how small they are. But conceptually, you are right that there could be cases where this actually highlights the fact that the transfers happening between 2 areas or one side of the market is leaning towards one single direction. Is a net importer is all the time an import or all the time an export. That is a piece of information that you can appreciate from this plot.
And then based on the next slide after this one, I can assume that a lot of that the bank is taking in is the solar during the middle part of the day.
Correct. Yeah, it's a very natural complement of balancing areas in the market.
Right, along with Idaho Power. Yeah, this is great information. I really appreciate it, Guillermo.
Thank you.
Guillermo, I'm checking to see if there's any other questions here from the governing body. And Andy, go ahead.
Thank you, Guillermo. Actually, a question that's maybe it's some of the information that's in the report, but not in the slide deck. I think one thing that's reported is the transfer estimated maximum transfer capacity. And I know you mentioned there's been increased participants. Has there also been kind of increase in transfer capacity made available by existing participants in recent quarters?
Oh, I would have to go and check specifically the data member of the body. I don't have that specific information at hand, and I don't want to provide anything that is not accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Guillermo, I have one comment to make, maybe there's a question in there before going to public comment, is on the slide that John was addressing with you, the showing the from and to. Your comment about how really well this depicts visually the interconnectedness of the flows through the EIM is really, really good. And it really shows how fluid the market is with respect to all of the players. It's a really fascinating slide. I'm glad that you and your team developed this. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're correct. This is a great way to show the diversity of the market and how all the may flow throughout the entire system.
Yes. So now we'll go to public comment. And Cyrus, do you want to check and see if there's anyone who wants to make a comment?
As a reminder to attendees, if you'd like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone only line. There seem to be no comments in queue at this time.
Thank you. Our next item is agenda item 10, which is the WEIM implementation update. This will be done by Khaled Abdul Rahman, who is our Vice President of Power Systems and Market Technology.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Oh, great. So good afternoon, WEIM governing body. I'm here, actually to happily report that the 3 new EIM entities that will be joining us this spring on April 5th, they're all past the parallel operation, and we actually had even reported the informational report that we typically report to FERC in terms of, describing how the parallel operation and the results and the readiness of these 3 entities. They all passed all of the readiness criteria, completed, filed, and we are basically on a standby 30-day, since the time that we filed the report. We typically have to allow 30 days after that before they go live. So as I said, the intended go live date that we are driving towards is April 5 of this year, 2023. There is all the items that is from, typically is needed for the systems and for the readiness is completed, as I said, but there is one for 2 of the entities, which is El Paso and Vanguard. We are actually waiting or standby mode, and we could probably get the FERC authorization for those entities. It is not an ISO FERC filing. It is those entities basically they file, and they are waiting for the authorization to join or to use market-based rates. That's the only thing that we are waiting for. We are expecting that, FERC will issue that authorization hopefully by either March 24 or at most, March. We could wait until March 30th. And we are working with the EIMs, like in case, in case this doesn't come, which we think that, we didn't have any case that it didn't come, right? So hopefully, things will, I will have more information by the end of this week on the 24th or before the end of this month. For WAPA, Desert Southwest, that is not needed because it's a federal company. So that we are on track for that. So we're going live on April 1st regardless. But if the other 2 entities or one of them didn't come up on time, then we will set hopefully another go live date. We are trying to still target April, and we have, as I said, we are very, hopefully it's gonna come online on time, and we will not change the go live date. But if it doesn't, then we can target another one, and I will be updating, the board for the new date. But we're going to be working and making sure that also the EIMs are ready. But for California ISO, we have provided, several other options in case, as a backup plan for inside, in April timeframe, So we're still going to target April timeframe for the go live. But hopefully we will not use that backup plan. We haven't used it, before, but we're ready on both options. At this time, everything that we could do or we need to complete, we have actually completed. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was very informative, and I think that probably addressed a lot of the questions that the governing bodies may have had with this uncertainty. But let me check and see if there's any questions from the governing body members. And I'm not seeing any, so I think you touched on all the things that they had planned to ask you about.
Thank you.
Before I move on, let me see if there's any public comments. So Cyrus, can you go back to public comment?
If you'd like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon or dial #2. There are no comments in the queue at this time.
Thank you. And Claude, thank you. We hope, like you just stated, that that FERC comes through and we can see all 3 entities go live on April 5th. That'll be exciting.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
So let's move on now. And our last formal item on the agenda is agenda item 11. And that is a briefing on the governing body planning calendar. And once again, we have Anna McKenna.
Hi, everyone again. So on the planning calendar, next slide, please. I just wanted to focus on a couple of items and make sure, I believe you've all had an opportunity to read this, but just to raise some attention to several items. I won't cover too much today. You will be providing a joint opinion tomorrow on the market parameter enhancements at the joint meeting. And we'll also have the array of briefings that we do on a regular basis as listed. In May, we do have an important item, as Mark noted earlier in the CEO report. We'll be taking the day-ahead market enhancements as a joint decision to you. And as well as that, we will, at that joint meeting, we'll also have the normal briefings scheduled and listed in that slide 35. We don't know yet. There may be other items that come in May as well, but this is what we know of right now. Next slide, please. For the rest of the year and the quarters, we did note that there will be in the second quarter, there will be a decisional item on election of the WEIM governing body chair and vice chair, as you guys are aware. We also have the proposed joint item under day-ahead market enhancements I noted. That's in quarter 2. And right now we don't have any additional items. For quarter 3 and 4, I don't have anything to report just yet as to which items will be coming to you as either joint or advisory, a little bit early in the year. As we work through some additional stakeholder initiatives, we may have some items that will come to you in the 3rd and 4th quarter, but nothing explicit to report at this time. So that pretty much covers my comments on the upcoming items. And I would be happy to answer any questions or receive any feedback and comments from you all.
Anna, thank you for the update. And I had one question for you, but you addressed it regarding the 3rd and 4th quarters that you expect to see that get updated, modified as we get closer to the 3rd and 4th quarter. So thank you for that.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let me check with the governing body members to see if they have questions. And saying none, let me now go to public comment, Anna. So Cyrus, one more time, we'll see if there are any public comments.
Final reminder to attendees, if you've got a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon on Zoom or #2 on the phone lines. No comments in the queue at this time.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the governing body members to see if they have any other items that they need to address before we adjourn. Seeing none, we will stand adjourned and see everyone next time. And there is the joint meeting tomorrow. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair Kanzioka, governing body.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for using Event Services. You may now disconnect.